Okay, so we're on page 1 with the altruistic motivation, and now I'm going to screen share, I hope. Okay. I'm just setting my screen up here for a second. Okay. So this first opening prayer is the altruistic motivation. So we recite it twice in English, once in Tibet. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dangwa je pe dra no par je pe ge. Tarpa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo par je pa tam she ki so je pe. Manam ka dam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang den. Dug now dang drel nor du la na me pa yang dag pa zog pe shang ju bren po she to pa ja. Next prayer is action bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is two Sanskrit words together. Bodhi means enlightenment, and chitta is the heart center, the heart mind. This is the brain mind. This is the heart mind. So the enlightened heart mind is bodhicitta, the holy enlightened mind, and we're putting it into action. So that's what this prayer helps us to remember. So we recite twice in English, once in Tibet. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Te she du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Du de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Now we go to page 5, which is the short refuge prayer. So we're taking refuge. Refuge is like our home place where it's safe and comfortable, where we can go to escape all the confusion, all the delusion, all the lies, all the greed, all the anger, and so on that surrounds our lives and so on. We can take refuge in the three jewels. The three jewels is the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the mind of the Buddha, the heart mind of the Buddha. The Dharma is the speech of the Buddha, the intellectualization of the Buddha who taught 2,600 years ago. So that's the Dharma teachings of the Buddha. And then the Sangha is the community of people, the brothers and sisters, etc., who are all following the Buddhist path. So this is the Sangha. So it's the mind of the Buddha, the speech of the Buddha, and the body of the Buddha. So it's body, speech, and mind, the three jewels. So when we do that, it's Om is the body, Ah is the in the throat is the speech of the Buddha, and Hung is in the heart, is the heart center, which is the mind of the Buddha. When we recite this prayer, these refuge prayers, we are holding the three jewels in the palm of our two hands. So our hands are together, but they're not pressed tight together. We can take our thumbs and put them inside our palms so that we remember that we're holding the three jewels. We're not squeezing them. We are caressing those three jewels at our heart center. So this becomes a mnemonic. This becomes a remembrance of the meaning of the three jewels of the refuge prayer. So we recite this. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In Tibet, Sangye Chodang Soki Chodam La, Shangju Bardu Dagni Kapsuchi, Dagi Jinsoki Pe Sonamgi, Drola Penshir Sangye Jupashog. And now the last prayer of our opening prayers is the four immeasurables. These are the four vast, immeasurable qualities of bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is the holy enlightened mind, and they have four qualities: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So these are the four qualities of all the enlightened beings, whether they are Buddhist beings, whether they are Christian beings, whether they are Muslim beings, whether they are Jewish, whether they are Hindu, whatever tradition, Taoist, whatever tradition you can think of, that these enlightened beings have these four qualities: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So if you have a paper and pencil, and you're taking notes, you should write these down, because these are things that you want to know, the things that you want to memorize, because this is how you become the embodiment of the Dharma teachings. You become a Buddha yourself. You recognize your Buddha nature within yourself. So we recite this prayer twice in English, once in Tibet. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she dewa dang dewe grudang dempar jorchi. Dog now dang da now gi gu dang drawar jorchi. Dug now me pe de wa dang mi dra wa jur chi. Ne ring chak dang ni dang dra wei tang nam la ne pa jur chi. Okay, thank you. Those conclude our opening prayers for tonight. Does anybody have any questions or comment about these prayers? Okay. I don't mind being interrupted. So if during the course of our conversation tonight, our talk tonight, anybody has a question, you can turn on your microphone, speak right up, or raise your virtual hand in your little picture, and I will ask you to speak and so on. So okay. So tonight we're going to talk about the first chapter. The book that we're referring to is called The Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So this is no small book. This is like a college text. It's very detailed, has a lot of great information. This book is called a Lam Rim text. Ram, R-A-M, Lam, L-A-M, Rim, R-I-M, which means stages of the path to enlightenment. So by reading this book, by studying this book, by becoming the embodiment of this book, are the stages to become a Buddha, to recognize yourself as a Buddha. So it not only teaches you what it is to be a Buddha by recognizing what it is to be a human being and then being a perfect human being, but it also teaches you how to practice being a Buddha, what your activities become as a Buddha. So it's a complete book and is very powerful. So all the other teachings that we do is basically based on this book. So this book is over 1,000 years old. And there are several English translations, and we use this particular English translation because it's very accurate, very good. And we can talk more about it as we move along. So tonight we're starting with the first chapter, and and we're going to be talking about our primary cause. Our primary cause is our Buddha nature. Why is it that we have a human life? Why aren't we born as an animal? Why aren't we born as an insect? Why are we born in this particular kind of life where we have great ability to be able to learn, to be able to contemplate, to be able to practice, to be able to live among good people who are supporting us in many different ways, to have teachings around us that we can go to and so on. We're very fortunate to have that. So why do we have that? What is the primary cause that is moving that? Well, our primary cause is that we have this Buddha nature, that we have this supreme nature that is moving us to be able to help other beings. So we're trying to find a way to be able to do that. And maybe we've tried many other ways that haven't worked out so good. And by process of elimination, we've gotten to this point of the Buddha teachings. So Buddha is a Sanskrit word that means awakened one. That's what Buddha means, awakened one. So instead of saying Buddha nature, you could say awakened nature. So what are we awakened of? We're awakened of all the surroundings, all this nature around us. And what does it all mean? Where does it all come from? Where does it all go? And also our human nature. What is our human nature in the midst of all this other stuff going on? So it's the stuff that we can see, the stuff that we can hear, the stuff that we can feel with our senses and so on. But it's also the stuff that is invisible to us, that only can be accessed through our quietude, through our being able to rest our physical body, being able to rest our intellectual mind, that is causing all these obscurations, all these blockages, all these confusions, all these emotions, that is blocking up our spiritual body. The spiritual body is where our awakened nature is. And so we need to be able to learn to control those things that are blocking up that awakened nature, so that the reality, the truth, the light of that awakened nature comes through. Right now it's there, but it's blocked up with our confusion. It's blocked up with our monkey mind. It's jumping around from one thing to the next. We're trying to develop a one-pointed mindfulness that allows us to channel our energy. We have physical body energy, and our moving around all the time, our fidgeting is all characteristic of that kind of energy. But if we can rest our body in a comfortable spot for a period of time, then that energy that would be spent fidgeting now gets dedicated, now it gets used for the sake of our meditation. Likewise, our mental activity. I'm going from one thought to the next. I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking I got to do this. I'm thinking I had to do that. I'm thinking that somebody said something to me. I'm thinking, the phone's going to ring. I'm thinking all these different things that is confusing me or that is distracting me. But if I can just lay those thoughts to rest, now all that mental activity I can channel, I can use for the sake of my meditation. So now I've got my physical energy, I've got my intellectual energy that is being focused for the cause of my spiritual energy, my meditation, my awakened nature, to unlock that, which is very subtle, very subtle. It's not very apparent to us. We may have a yearning for it. We may have a sense that there is something there and I want to know what it is, but it's very difficult to find. You need to find some kind of a spiritual system that helps you to unlock that spirituality. So by using our physical energy, our intellectual energy is like a key that fits into a lock. We twist the key and the lock springs open. The lock is the lock that's around our heart center, that body, the mind of the Buddha, what we call the mind of the Buddha. The Buddha is not exclusive. In other words, Buddha could mean Christ. Buddha could mean God. Buddha could mean Yahweh. Buddha could mean Brahma, could mean Hindu, could mean Krishna, could mean so many different things from all these different traditions that human beings have developed in their civilizations and so on. And at the essence of each one of those, there is this pure clarity that is this Christ, or is this God, or is this Buddha, whatever name that particular culture has given it. So Buddhism is not exclusive, but it is very comprehensive. There's a lot of material, there's a lot of teachers that can teach us about it. There's a lot of support for it. So that's one reason why it's so rich with a culture that is so good, that helps us to lead us to that awakened nature, to our awakened nature. So the Buddha who lived 2,600 years ago, the living Buddha, the historical Buddha, he taught all this. He had this experience of being able to recognize the enlightenment of being awakened, of what it was to be able to be a complete human being. And he realized that he could not just give it to somebody. He had to work for it by eliminating all the confusions, all the possibilities, and so on, by resting the intellectual mind, by resting that. Then this enlightenment became apparent. The wisdom was already there, it was within him. He says, and everybody has it. It doesn't matter whether you're a human being. It doesn't matter whether you're an animal. It doesn't matter that you are an insect. These are called sentient beings. Sentient beings means that you have a life cycle, that you are born, that you are prone to illness, sickness, or injury, that you get old. And as you get old, you begin to lose some of your acuity of functionality, whether it's physically or intellectually. You begin to degrade, or you begin to decay. And then finally, we die. And all sentient beings have these four qualities. We all die. We all get old. We all are prone to sickness and injury, and we are all born. So these are what we say is sentient beings. So this is why we have such great respect for all living beings, whether it's an animal, whether it's a human being, whether it's an insect or something like that. We're all part of this same vibration. We're all part of the same phenomenal nature. So the Buddha taught this and said that as a human being, we have the ability to be able to recognize these things, where the animals and the insects, they don't have that ability. They can't recognize themselves and understand where they are, who they are, etc., like that. But human beings do have that ability. And human beings can change. The animals and the insects, they can't change. But human beings can change. And these are qualities that are very precious. And this is why we are developing this, to be able to transcend to our highest completion of being a sentient being, of becoming a perfect Buddha, a perfectly awakened being. So this is what we're learning about. So this is our primary cause, is to be able to do that. Now, we could selfishly say, oh, I want to do that for my own aggrandizement. I want to do that so that I can be great. I can be better than everybody else. But that becomes a trap, because what we're doing is we're just feeding our ego, developing our ego, and claiming this as being superior to other beings and so on. The ego always wants to be exclusive. The ego wants to be all powerful. To prevent us from doing that, if everything that we do is for the benefit of other beings, we have then the compassion to be able to recognize that other beings have confusion in their lives, they have suffering in their lives, and we're offering whatever it is that we have attained physically, intellectually, spiritually, we are sharing with them. Through that generosity, it helps us. It helps us to become confident. It helps us to become strong. It helps us to recognize our awakened nature, our Buddha nature. A metaphor for this is the sun, the sunshine, the sun itself. The sun is just burning, 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 sending out light, sending out heat, sending out energy for all beings, for all things, with no expectation of anything coming back to the sun. The sun is made up of material that we have within ourselves. It's very concentrated. It's very powerful. It has ignited, and it is creating all this energy for us and so on. But the essence of what the sun is made up of is atomic structure and subatomic energy and so on. So in that way, we're all the same. So we need to be able to recognize that we have that essence within ourselves and ignite that powerful essence that we begin to radiate, that we begin to illuminate darkness. If we use the metaphor of darkness as being ignorant, unaware, not knowing, and that when we bring light to it, when we bring wisdom to it, now that darkness has been dissipated. So in that way, we are like the sun. So that metaphor of the sun, you see, works with us as we become more and more enlightened, more and more aware. We become brighter, we radiate more. Other beings can recognize our ability to have this knowledge, to be able to live this knowledge, to be the embodiment of this. Like, so we're radiating this and we are illuminating darkness that is around us. So this is something that we talk about quite a bit. We do this with a great deal of humility. It's not something that we become arrogant about. There may be beings that do get arrogant about it, but that becomes a trap. So we need to beware of that. Any questions or comment? Okay.
I have a question actually.
Yes.
About like ego. Is it possible to be completely dissolve your ego? And like where does the ego come from?
Right. We don't dissolve the ego. We assign the ego a job to do. Right now, for most of us, the ego is controlling us. We don't realize it's very, very subtle, but very powerful. The ego is controlling us, but we find that we can't get rid of the ego. And the ego is actually part of being a human being. It's how we intellectually function and so on. The animals don't have an ego. The insects don't have an ego. Human beings do. And we can see what human beings have created for themselves out of ego. They've created a lot of good stuff, but they've also created a lot of bad stuff. So we need to reevaluate. We need to step back. We need to put our ego on hold and be able to study, to be able to understand the spirituality, which does not involve the ego at all. It should not involve the ego at all. And then with that, then we can assign the ego a job to do that has the spiritual component built into it. So we're taking selfishness, which is ego. We're taking that selfishness and we're making it selfless. We are sharing it with others. We are giving it to others. Ego wants to be unique. Ego wants to be powerful, the most powerful. So where does it come from? It comes from our intellect. We have this ability human beings have this ability to be able to create things around themselves. But the things that we create are prone to confusion, prone to delusion, prone to hatred, prone to desire, attachment, prone to jealousy, prone to greediness and pridefulness. So we need to be aware of those things and what causes those things, and then what the antidotes are to be able to transform those things into wisdom and skillful means. And that's the awakening. That's how we become the awakened nature of what we say Buddha. So I hope that answers your question at least a little bit.
It did. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So going back, so I'm referring to this outline book that I've given to most of you, and if you don't have it and you want it, you need to let me know, and I will send you a copy of this. But this is an outline of this book. So we learn about these things, which are sometimes very, very subtle. We learn these things through similes. We learn these things through the image of finding a rock out in the ground and not recognizing that it's actually silver or it's gold or it's a diamond because it's got all this mud and stuff all around it. It's got all this dry dirt around it. We don't recognize it as being this precious jewel or gem. So our awakening, our awareness is like that hidden precious gem. It's got all this muck around it, but we haven't realized what's inside of it yet. So the Dharma is like that. The Dharma is hidden within ourselves. We have to be able to remove the dirt, the slime, the confusion that is around that so we can see and recognize the precious jewel, the silver, the gold, whatever that is within there. Another simile is it's like a mustard seed or a sesame seed. Mustard seeds and sesame seeds are very tiny. You've probably seen them in your food or something like that. But you know that if you can take a mustard seed or sesame seed and squeeze it, that there's a tiny, tiny, tiny drop of oil that comes out of it. So the Dharma is like that drop of oil. Now, one mustard seed or one sesame seed is not going to produce a great deal of oil. But if you can take a lot of those and squeeze a lot of those, you get a lot of oil. So the same is true with the Dharma. There's a lot of teaching. There's a lot of things that we need to be able to process as being a human being that are within ourselves, they're within our capability. And the teachers are here to help us to recognize those things. But those things begin to accumulate. And before you know it, we have a whole jar, we have a whole bucket, we have a whole container full of the oil that comes from the sesame or comes from the mustard seeds. So there's a simile there for that. Another simile is it's like butter and milk. If you were out at a farm and you had a cow and you started milking the cow, it would not become apparent to you that in that milk is butter. And you could go through life thinking, oh, well, this milk is delicious and everything, but I never knew that there was butter in there. But you find that if you take that milk and you put it into a churn and you are pressing over and over again, churning that milk, what comes up is butter. And the butter can be used for many different things, for cooking and so on like that. So it's hidden, it's invisible, it's in the milk, but we don't recognize it. So through the processing of churning the milk, the butter comes out. So this is another simile. This is another way of saying that within us is this Dharma. And what we need to do is we need to focus, we need to practice, we need to identify and use this process to recognize that enlightened quality within ourselves, that bodhicitta. So the bodhicitta is like the butter that comes out of the milk. The milk would be like just being an ordinary human being. By processing the ordinary human being, we reveal that within us is the bodhicitta. So there's probably many other similes, but this is a way that we teach because many of these things are invisible to our ordinary human mind. And we need to be able to point them out. And for most of us, we need to have a teacher to help us to do that, a mentor, someone who has experienced this before, who points it out to us. The Buddha, the historical Buddha, and his name was Shakyamuni Buddha, the sage of the Shakya clan. I talked about this last week. But Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha, he had a great gift. And he was able to recognize all these things. He was able to experience this because his time was right. His karma was ripe. So he was able to recognize this, and his gift was to be able to process this in a way that we can understand. So we may be we have this life, and we may be subjected, or we may have access to all this stuff, but if we haven't been pointed in that direction, we may not recognize those opportunities. We may not recognize the oil in the mustard seed. We may not realize the jewel in that rock. We may not recognize the butter in the milk. But when somebody points it out to us, now we say, oh, now I got it. I can make some on my own. So this is what we are doing. So this is a gift to us from Buddha Shakyamuni. And he says, don't take my word for any of this. You need to prove it yourself. You need to find it yourself. So it's not something we can hand somebody or plug into somebody and give them this. We're teaching you the way in which this is done, and you have to experience it for yourself. This is part of the awakened nature, that we have to do that. So we talk about that there are 5 families of human beings. We say that these are 5 families of the awakened nature, of Buddha nature. The 5 families are, number 1, the disconnected family. Number 2 is the indefinite family. Number 3 is the hearer family. Number 4 is the solitary realizer family. And number 5 is the Mahayana family. Those are the 5 families of awakened nature. So we fit into those, and we can change. We can go from being one to another. It's a progression. So the disconnected family are those human beings who have no connection at all to their spirituality. They are ignorant of their spirituality. They have a physical body, they have an intellect, but they have no sense of their spirituality, of their connectedness. By the way, spiritual means connectedness. If you look it up in the dictionary, somewhere down in the definitions of spiritual, maybe 6 or 7 down on that list, you'll find that it says connectedness. That when we are spiritual, we're connected to not only each other, but to nature, to all the animals, to the insects, to the trees, to the grass, to the atmosphere. We're all part of the same thing. We're all made up of the same materials, and we have the same energy that is pervading us all. So being spiritual is being aware and being naturally awakened to that. So the disconnected family has no sense of that connection. Everybody for themselves, and that's all they know. There's a lot more detail about it, and you can read about it in this book. But for right now, we're doing an introduction to this. The second is called the indefinite family, or the dubious family. This is the family of people. This is the people who say, I heard this guy's going to be talking. He's going to be talking about some spirituality and stuff. And, I really don't believe in it, but, I'm going to go and check it out. I'm going to stick my toe in the water and see what the temperature is like. But I have no intention of diving into the water and really immersing myself in this. I don't even think it exists. But my good friend over here has convinced me that it would be a good idea to go and to experience this with him, get this teaching. But I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's good. And so this is the indefinite person. This is the indefinite family. This is dubious. He's dubious to the reality, to the truth of that spiritual nature, of that awakened nature, of that spiritual body. Doesn't think it exists. So you may be there. You may have been there. People that are there now. The third group is called the hearer family. These are the Shravakas. In our prayers, we talk about the Shravakas. Another name for this is the arhats. And these beings are beings who have taken up the teachings, who are listening to the teachings, who are processing the teachings, processing some of the practices and so on. Their motivation is fear that if they don't do it, they are going to suffer the consequences of being in hell, or being born again as an animal, or being born again as an ignorant being or something like that. So they are selfishly motivated. They're selfishly motivated to attain what they think is enlightenment. They just want it for themselves. They're not interested in other people. They may have a certain compassion that other people, all beings, are suffering, but they're not going to dedicate their lives. They're not going to be like the sun, radiating that light and energy for the sake of other beings. It's going to have that energy, and it's going to keep it by itself. An analogy here, if you're into astronomy or astrology, the planet Saturn. The planet Saturn is this big gaseous ball, this big gaseous planet, but it's got these rings around it. So the rings around it are like a metaphor for a belt, and it is keeping all that energy for itself. It's holding on to it selfishly for itself. But if you can not just release, you can't release those rings around Saturn, but if you can understand what those rings are doing and concentrating the energy, then you can use that Saturn energy for the sake of other beings, because it's big in gas, it's very efflusive. Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, is made up of gas, but it doesn't have any constriction. It doesn't have any belts. It doesn't have any rings around it. So Jupiter represents higher consciousness. Saturn represents containment, holding back. But if you recognize that, you can use that, you can harness that energy. So these are similes. These are another way of being able to understand things that maybe you have been exposed to at some time or another in your life. So the arhats, the hearers, they hear the teachings, they hear the practices, and they're processing it, they're working on it. They've mastered it to the point of being selfish with it, of being egocentric about it. Oh, I'm a great practitioner. I'm an arhat. Oh, I'm a shravaka. Oh, I'm great. These are beings who have spent a lifetime maybe living in a cave somewhere and have learned many things, but they're selfishly holding it for themselves. The next family is the family of the solitary realizers. Now, the solitary realizers, another name for them is the Pratyeka Buddha. Pratyeka means individual. Pratyeka is the Sanskrit word. It means individual, means individual liberation. That they are liberating themselves and only themselves, and they become arrogant about it. They become selfish about it. They're like the arhats, the hearers. They're engaging in the practices, engaging in the teachings and so on, but the results that they have, they're not sharing with other beings. As a matter of fact, they would rather stay in their caves and their hermitages, they would in the woods. They would not want to go into the villages, and they would not want to take up students and be able to share with them. Their motivation, again, is the same as the arhats. Their motivation is if they don't do this, they're going to suffer in the lower realms. They're going to suffer in the hells. They're going to suffer as a hungry ghost, or as an animal, or as a insect. So this is a prime motivation for them. But they've accomplished some realization, high realization, but they look at it as it is only theirs. And they don't want to tell anybody where they got it from. They don't want to share it with anybody. Oh, I learned this from this book. Oh, I learned it from this teacher. Oh, I learned it from my practices, and here's what my practices are. They don't want to share that. They want to have this sense of self-aggrandizement that they are wonderful, and that's all they need. So that's the fourth of the of the five families. The fifth of the five families is called the Mahayana family. Mahayana, Maha means great, is a Sanskrit word that means great. Maha, M-A-H-A. And you've probably seen it many times in different books and teachings about these things in Hinduism and so on. Maha means great. And yana is a vehicle. A vehicle is a device that we use from getting from one place to another. So this is the great vehicle, the Mahayana. The vehicle that we're using is our spirituality to get from ignorance, to get from confusion to enlightenment. So this great vehicle is this middle way teaching, is this teaching of the Buddha, the Mahayana teaching, is this teaching of the Buddha, the Dharma, and so on, and teaching it to the point that it is not selfish, that we need to do this for the basis of other beings. The Buddha taught at three levels. We talk about three baskets of the Buddha's teachings. So the first level was the level of discipline. The second level was the level of sharing, of devotion, the middle way. And the third level is the level of wisdom of actually becoming an enlightened, awakened being, what it is to be an awakened being. So the first level of discipline, the hero of that is the Arhat. The hero of that is the Pratyeka Buddha. The hero of the Mahayana is the Bodhisattva. So this is the first time I've used that word tonight. Bodhi means enlightenment. Sat means being. And Va makes it a holy being. Sattva is a holy being. So it's an enlightened, holy being, Bodhisattva, who is on the path to becoming a Buddha. So the hero of the middle way, the hero of the Mahayana, is the Bodhisattva, who is a human being who is on that path. Then, in the third level of teaching of the Buddha was the wisdom teaching, and this is actually becoming a Buddha, to recognize oneself as a Buddha. So this is called the indestructible vehicle, the indestructible vehicle. The middle one was the great vehicle, and the first one was the disciplined vehicle. So the Buddha was teaching these simultaneously all the time, and he had hundreds, if not thousands, of followers that were listening to all of his teachings. Some people would just hear the discipline. Some people would recognize the discipline, but they were also hearing about the Mahayana, the middle way, the Bodhisattva path. But then there were others who not only were understanding the discipline, not only understanding the Bodhisattva way, but they were also understanding that wisdom as well, the way in which to be able to use that within oneself and to recognize one's own awakened nature, one's own Buddha nature, and to be able to be like the sun and radiate that light. So the Mahayana family is this middle way, who is doing this for the sake of others, who is sharing, who has learned how to control the ego, how to recognize what it is to be a human being. And by that, to understand the things that keep us down, the things that confuse us, the stuff that create and sustain the emotions, but also the things that overcome those. So we've liberated ourselves from the emotions. We've liberated ourselves from being controlled by those emotions. So as I said before, when we were talking about the ego, that we liberate ourselves from the ego. The ego wants to control us. Much like you see an animal that has a ring through his nose, and there's a leather strap or whatever, and the owner of the animal is pulling the animal around, guiding him around where to go. So the ego is like that leather strap through the ring in the nose that's guiding us, instead of we taking control of where it is that we're going to do, where we're going to go, and what it is that we're going to do. So these 5 families represent us in a way of being able to understand our spirituality. So I could ask each one of you, well, where do you think you are? And I think that there's going to be different degrees of, what you're going to say and everything. But I think we all can recognize that we have been disconnected. We have been dubious. We've been a hearer, but we've been doing it selfishly. We may have attained some stuff, but I'm holding it for myself. And then maybe there's times when we were willing to share what it is that we have with all beings. Any questions or comments?
Quick question, Lance. Was the third human family, was it hero or hearer?
Hearer, Hearer, a hearer. They're listening to the teachings.
Perfect, thanks.
Yes. So the Buddha, let's go. Brendan, go ahead.
Doing this. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, you're breaking up a little bit, but go ahead.
I know we can't know this with certainty, but if they're doing this simply because they don't want to be reincarnated as a bug or something, what would their karma be? Do we have any way of knowing that?
Well, not that it matters a whole lot to us individually, but for their sake, they may come back as another human being. Most likely they will, because they're virtuous. To get to where they are, there's a high degree of virtue. But at the same time, they're not going to become a Buddha right away, because they have to purify those attachments to their selfishness, to their ego. They have to liberate from that selfishness. And it may take lifetimes to be able to do that in terms of reincarnation. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
So we say that every one of our meditation practices, every one of our teaching sessions like this is a death and a rebirth. What were you doing 2 hours ago? Think about it. Is it like a dream?
Yes.
Can you actually visualize everything? Are you there in the same way? Or is it just like a dream? Who were you at that time? And now you've entered into this session with us, and you've heard at the very least, a hearer, you've heard these things, and maybe it's made you think about something different that you hadn't thought about before. And you can never, ever lose that. You may suppress it, but it's up to you how top of your consciousness you keep it. But once you get it, you never lose it. If it can become suppressed, you can bring it back up. You can refer to your notes. You can read the book. You can refresh yourself and bring it back up. So and then we move on. So now we are reborn. So that old person 2 hours ago who was in that dream now has the benefit of these teachings and now is reborn as a new person who has the experience of hearing this wisdom, this practice, this teaching. So it's like a birth, a new person. So we go through this many, 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 many times in our lifetimes, in this very lifetime. But imagine that we were born before in another body. We have this body now for 80, 100 years, whatever it is, and then we'll die, and then maybe have another birth, have another body, someplace else, doing something else, and so on. So there's this continuum that we recognize that we are part of, and that we are engaging with that continuum during our practices. That's why it's so important to develop your own practice, to recognize your own spirituality, not taking my word for it or the Buddha's word for it, anybody else's word for it. You are actually developing it yourself. There's another metaphor that we use, and that is if you go out after a rain, say, and you happen to have a brook out behind your house or nearby, or a stream or a river or something like that, and there's been this downpour of rain and everything, and you go take this glass, this clear glass, and you scoop up some of the water and you set it down, it's muddy water. It's got all this silt in it and so on. You can't see through it, it's opaque. But if you let that water sit there for a while, you come back the next day and some of the silt has settled to the bottom, and you can begin to see some light coming through the upper part of the glass of water, the muddy water. And if you come back the next day, even more will have fallen to the bottom of the glass, and you'll be able to see it more clear water and so on, until finally you can see all the silt has gone to the bottom of the glass and all you see is clear water at the top. This is like our awareness. This is like our mind. In the beginning, it's very muddy. You have so many concepts. You have so many things that you've been engaged in all your life, and you can't see the reality for all the mud, for all the junk, all the confusion. But if you learn to be able to control your mind, to be able to control your physical body, your intellectual mind, you settle that down. You learn how to do that and you rest, then clarity starts to come about. And you start to recognize the clarity of what your life is and so on. So in that regard, we say that the water is medicine. In the beginning, you may be taking it, but you don't know what it's doing. But as you become more and more familiar with the results of that medicine, as you become more and more educated as to what the components are of that medicine, it becomes clear to you, and that medicine then becomes your consciousness. You'll be able to see clearly. You'll be able to see with awakened awareness, like the Buddha nature, the Buddha mind. So water is like medicine in that analogy. So you see how all this works together? And you'll see that if you've been with us, in the past, with these one-on-one sessions, and you continue with us going forward, you'll see how all this interconnectedness is happening, all this spirituality of thought, of philosophy, of practice, all comes together and so on. So Buddhism is a philosophy. It's a philosophy of purifying the self. The self can be identified as the ego. And what we're trying to do is to control the self, to use the self as a vehicle to be able to recognize these things. We have this gift of being a human being, but to be able to use that gift to not just be satisfied with our physical, intellectual, but with our spiritual, with our big mind, and recognize that. We say we have these three bodies. We have a physical, intellectual, spiritual body. If most people are only concerned and recognize their spiritual and their intellectual and their physical, so it's like a two-legged stool. It's not very balanced. You're not going to be able to make it stand on its own. But if you recognize and utilize your third body, your spiritual body, now you're a complete human being. And now you can stand on your own. So this is what we're trying to present, that through this spirituality, you become powerful, you become stable, you become a complete human being. Okay, any other comments or questions? I want to do a practice with you. So, but before we get there, I want to make sure that everybody's somewhat clear on what we've been talking about tonight.
Lance, I have a quick question. It sounds like what you're talking, it's a term that I've read recently, the far shore, and how there's an individual who was so far along that he was free from suffering. Is that kind of what you're talking about right now?
Well, sure.
Familiar with that?
Yeah, that analogy of a far shore.
Yes.
Yes. So we say that we're on one side of the shore. And in this one side of the shore is our confusion, our suffering, etc. There's happiness there too. But what we find is happiness at some point turns into suffering. Because even with our body, we get old, we get sick, we die, but at some point in our life, we're very happy with ourselves. But then that happiness turns to suffering when we get old, get sick, and die. So it happens that way with so many other things in our lives and so on. But we realize that there's this other shore, there's this other side where there's no suffering. There's only pure wisdom. And we want to get there. But between us and that other shore is this river that is constantly moving. And we have to get across that river to go to the other side. So we build a raft or something to get ourselves across that river to get to the other side. But then when we get there, do we need the raft anymore? Do we need the boat anymore? Some people will want to carry that boat, even though they got to the other shore. They don't want to lose it, and that becomes a trap for them. That's like the Shravaka or the Pratyeka Buddha. They're holding on to, oh, this is how I got there. This is my identity now. Instead of saying, I don't need it anymore. And then to become liberated, to become free. So the other shore is a great metaphor for saying that's where we want to get to. That's the other side of our consciousness, so to speak.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I picked that up from Buddhist fiction. Apparently, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. There's so much other stuff out there to read. So
That's right. Yes, the book Siddhartha was great. Using that kind of an analogy, the ferry boat man,
yes,
because crossing that river, we may not know how to do it. So we need somebody to help us to cross over there. So we take on, we ask somebody, oh, please help me. I want to get to the other side, but I can't do it by myself. To admit that I can't do that. See, one of the big problems with being a human being is we tend to think that we can know everything by ourselves. We're very arrogant. And we hold on to that arrogance. But if you can go out, if you can close your eyes and you can sit here and you can blast off of this planet and you can go out into the solar system and you can go past the solar system and you're seeing all these great galaxies and so on, and you turn around and you look back at the planet Earth from where you came and you say, my God, those human beings down there, who the heck do they think they are? I'm looking at all this incredible stuff here in the cosmos, and human beings think that they are greater than all of that, or that they have the ability to know all of this. One of the qualities of being an enlightened being is by being satisfied of being a human being and not trying to go too far out of yourself. And that way you're grasping for those things that human beings aren't capable of being able to comprehend. We're always trying to learn more. We think we can know these things rather than just saying, let me be satisfied with what we have. There's a lot of analogies in this. How much time and effort and resources do we spend on things that never get answered? All these science things. I mean, there's a lot of good things that comes out of these things. But think of how much suffering is put on hold because we need to be able to find out these certain things that we could be using those resources for to be able to help people here on this planet to lead a better life. So we have to make, our value judgments. But generally speaking, human beings think that they can know everything rather than just be satisfied. Maybe we don't have to work as hard as we do. Maybe we don't need to accumulate as much as we do. Maybe we don't need to hoard billions and billions of dollars. Maybe we don't need to control all this land. Maybe we can grow food for everybody. Maybe we can make medicines for everybody. Maybe we can work on those things and not have to attach dollar signs to it all the time. And just be happy. Imagine that you didn't have to go to work till you were 30 years old. Imagine that during the time you're 30 and 40 were the times of your life where you worked. You had a job, maybe you had a couple different jobs, going from one thing to another. But you were working, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. Not a big deal, You have plenty of vacation time and everything. And then when you became 60 years old, it was time to retire. And you can spend the rest of your life developing your spirituality, developing being a carpenter, being a mechanic, whatever other things that you always wanted to do. Go back to school, whatever you wanted to do. But meanwhile,
Right.
you had everything taken care of. All the money was there. You didn't have to worry about doctor bills. You didn't have to worry about food bills. You didn't have to worry about the house that you live in and everything like that. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, That's some kind of unrealistic, utopia. But do you think we have that within our capability as human beings on this planet to be able to do something like that? So that's an example. That's a simile.
Humility, right? That's what I'm hearing. Humility. The Buddha had humility. He didn't try to figure out
Right.
why is there something, you know.
Yeah. You realize it's just not necessary. Why not just be happy? Satisfied with what you've got. Okay. So we need examples. We need teachers. So if you want to go someplace, if you want to go to New York and you've never been there before, you don't know how to drive a car or whatever, and you wanted to get there, would you just walk up to a stranger on the street and say, "Hey, man, I got to go to New York. How do I get there?" And the guy says, "Oh, no problem. I know how to go there." And you say, "Okay, well, let's go." And you start going and you find out that you wind up in Ohio or something like that, because the truth is he's never been there himself, and he just thought he knew how to go. But meanwhile, you aligned yourself with him and now you've gotten lost along with him and so on. So the point here is, if you want to go to New York, it's best to ask somebody or get advice from somebody or travel with somebody who's been there before themselves and knows the best way to go and so on like that. So the same thing with spirituality or anything else that we learn, that we need to have teachers who have experience doing these things. So we want to have teachers, we want to have ideals, we want to have exemplars, those who have made the trip and are able to characterize the results of that trip. So in this case, I'm talking about enlightenment. I'm talking about liberation. So in Buddhism, we talk about these enlightened beings, these deities. And these deities are not gods in the same way that we talk about supreme gods, or that the Romans talk about gods, or the Greeks talk about gods, or the ancient Egyptians talk about gods, or even the Hindus talk about God. We're talking about deities that are within ourselves, that are like these facets of a diamond. And this indestructible diamond is in our heart center. And this diamond is made up of bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. That's what makes this up. But these facets are the different exemplars, are the different deities, the different Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the enlightened ones, who are bodhicitta, who have bodhicitta, but they have different ways of actualizing it, different ways of showing it to other beings. So these become our exemplars. So when we do these practices in Buddhism called deity yoga practices, this is part of the wisdom path, that third path that I was talking about, the three paths. This is part of that, what it is to be a Buddha, how it is to behave like a Buddha, and so on, to think like a Buddha. We use these exemplars, we use these practices to help us to do that. So in our last cycle of teachings, we talked about the Bodhisattva of wisdom was Manjushri. And almost every week in the last sessions, we went and we did Manjushri practice about how to develop, cultivate, and become wisdom. So this cycle, we're going to use Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of Compassion. So we're going to follow that, because if we have wisdom, there is happiness, we understand things and so on. But when we don't understand wisdom, Then we have suffering. And we have compassion for that suffering, whether it's our suffering or it's somebody else's suffering. So we need to recognize the suffering. We need to be able to recognize and use the antidote of the compassion to be able to overcome that suffering. So who better to lead us in that than the Bodhisattva, the holy enlightened being of compassion? And his name is Chenrezig. And I want to tell you, before we get too far along, is that there are many female Buddhas. And we're going to get to the female Buddhas. And the female Buddhas are the mother of the Buddhas. So they are very, very, very important. And so we're not making a valued judgment that the maleness is more important than the femaleness, the feminine quality. They are both equal. They are both one and the same. You can't have one without the other. So right now we're just using these that are pertinent to our conversation right now. And we will get to the others as we progress. Okay, so I'm going to screen share this with you. If you all have any of the packages that I've sent you, you may have the Avalokiteshvara Chenrezig practice. The sadhana was one of the things that I sent you. And if you have the Deity Yoga book that has all the many different practices in it, then you may have, you're going to find this on, I got to tell you what page number it is, on page 20. If you turn to the Deity Yoga book, you'll find this page here. Short Chenrezig meditation, the practice of purification and compassion. And here is the Bodhisattva of Compassion. So today we're not going to go into a lot of explanation with this, but I want to say that he is pure white. He's got a pure white body. This is a meditational deity. This is within ourselves. He is holding the jewel of enlightenment in his two lower hands, like this. The jewel of enlightenment, the wish-fulfilling jewel that brings liberation. In his left hand, he's holding a lotus flower to his left ear. And that lotus flower represents purity. In his right hand, he's holding the amala beads, like rosary beads. Maybe you're familiar with that name. Mala beads are these beads here, which represent skillful means or method. That we're taking this wisdom that comes from this flower, we're processing it in our heart center, and then we are sending it out to all beings through the method of our practice. And the primal cause here is our liberation, as our wisdom jewel. And this Buddha is sitting in the indestructible position on a lotus flower, which represents purity, and he's sitting on the white disc of compassion. So everything here has a meaning. So there's not enough time to go into everything right now. I want to get to this point to be able to demonstrate how complete these teachings are. So here we talk about emptiness. There's not time to talk about that, but this Om Shobhava Sudha Sarva Dharma Sobhava Sudoham. The mode of abiding of all phenomena is itself pure openness. The mode of abiding of all phenomena is itself pure openness. So all this phenomenal nature, everything that we see is all what we say empty of its own nature. It is pure. It is pure openness. There is nothing to hold on to. There is no reason to hold on to it. So we're visualizing that in this all-pervading emptiness is this flower that I just pointed out to you. And then we're going to do this mantra recitation. So a mantra is a mind protection. A mind protection. When we are reciting a mantra, which is in Sanskrit, that came from the Buddha, the mantra, when you're doing this, there's no time, there's no ability, there's no reason to be thinking of anything else. So the mantra becomes a mind protection to keep it from wandering to other thoughts. So here we say, in the center of Chenrezig is a moon disk with the letter Shri standing in the center. Around this, the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om means the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, Chenrezig. Mani is the jewel, that jewel that he's holding in his hands, the wish-fulfilling jewel. Padme is the lotus flower, the purity of the lotus flower, and Hung is to make manifest in the heart center. The Shri, this syllable here, Shri, that is the seed syllable and is the primal cause. The primal cause is the liberation of all sentient beings into nirvana. So light radiates from the mantra and is offered to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the Buddha fields. Blessings of compassion and wisdom return from the Buddha fields in the form of light, which is absorbed into myself. All obscurations of body, speech, and mind are purified. Again, compassionate light radiates from the heart mantra, dispelling the suffering and ignorance of all sentient beings of the 6 realms, who are then transformed into Chenrezig, the great compassionate one. All sentient beings are saying the mantra together at the same time. So here's a line drawing. We're visualizing that as we do this, we are sending this light from our heart center to all beings. So here is the Shri syllable. We can look at it in the English, Shri. We can look at it here in the Sanskrit. And this white light is coming from the Shri and is going to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, then comes back from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas back into the Shri. And then from the Shri, it goes out to all sentient beings, all in phenomenal nature, all around us in this world and worlds that we don't know. This is the mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. This is it written in the Sanskrit, Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. So I'm going to stop this for just a minute so I can. So this is this is the most popular, most powerful of all the mantras. So we're like starting at the very most powerful point to be able to do this. And maybe you've heard this, you've heard recordings of this, Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. So we're going to recite this together. We use the mala beads to make sure that we do a complete recitation. So we're not going to do just 4 or 5 recitations. We're going to do a whole mala round. We're going to do 108 recitations of this. And as we do this, we're visualizing at our center, in our heart center, is this Shri syllable, which is the primal cause, compassion for all suffering sentient beings. That's the primal cause. The mantra going around means, behold, the jewel of enlightenment, behold the jewel in behold the jewel in the enlightenment of all sentient beings. Behold the jewel of purity and for the enlightenment of all sentient beings. This is our primal cause. So we're visualizing the mantra going around that that seed syllable in our heart center like this. So it's going around clockwise. So you can put your hands up. So your three fingers like this. So this represents the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and going around the seed syllable around our heart center. And then you can close your eyes and you can visualize this mantra, the white light from this mantra, from the seed syllable, going to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, coming back from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to the seed syllable, then going back out through the mantra garland to all beings, to purify their confusions, their suffering, and offering them the compassion, showing them the compassion to be able to do this. So this is the mantra. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Now continue reciting. Keep your back straight. If you're sitting in a chair, keep your legs together. You can cross your ankles if you like, but keep your back straight is the most important part. If you're sitting on the cushion of a floor, you can cross your legs, keep your back straight, and then you're visualizing this mantra going around the seed syllable at your heart center out to all beings. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Shri. Hold your position. Keep your back straight. Keep your eyes closed. Stay relaxed. We'll do a short meditation. Feel your body vibrating from the recitation of the mantra. Harmonize with the vibration of all other beings. Feel the vibration of us who is on this Zoom right now, vibrating together from this recitation. And right now there are hundreds of thousands, if not more, beings who are reciting this mantra all around the world. And we are harmonizing with them. purifying the suffering, having compassion for the suffering of all beings, radiating pure white light for all beings to recognize compassion. Take a deep breath and hold it. Exhale and hold it. Breathe in from both nostrils and hold it. Exhale through both nostrils and hold it. Breathe in fresh, clean, pure air. Hold it. Exhale, stale, dark, contaminated air. Hold it. Stay relaxed and breathe at your own pace. Okay. Open your eyes. Now on the screen is the dissolution. The dissolution is we have just generated this visualization of the deity and of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, of the mantra garland, and now we are letting it dissolve. We're letting all that dissolve into light. And that light dissolves into our heart center, to our big mind. And it dissolves into the emptiness, into the shunyata is the Sanskrit word for emptiness. So here in the text it says, all the outer and inner phenomena dissolve into myself. And then I dissolve into light, which becomes non-dual with the all-pervading emptiness. All the outer is all that we see. All the trees, all the nature, all other beings. The inner phenomena is the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. Dissolve into myself, and I dissolve into that pure white light, which becomes non-dual with the all-pervading emptiness that pervades all things, things that we cannot see, things that we cannot understand, all the spirituality, as well as all the phenomenal things that we can see and experience. Rest the mind in a natural state for some time. Chinang no chu wo shu mei ko gyu. Do a short dissolution meditation. If your mind wanders, just bring it back to the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, dissolving into your heart center. And the light from the mantra at your heart center becoming invisible into the all-pervading emptiness of wisdom. and method. Take a deep breath and hold it. Fill your lungs with fresh, clean, pure air. Exhale, push out all that stale, negative, dark air and hold that breath. Okay. Open your eyes, breathe natural. And now here's the dedication for this practice of Chenrezig. I arise and I appear again as Chenrezig, this Bodhisattva of Compassion, the holy enlightened being of compassion. We recite this out loud. By this virtue, may I quickly realize the state of Chenrezig, and may all sentient beings, without exception, attain the glorious state of Chenrezig. Gewa di nor dudag, Chenrezig wang drub gurney, drowa jikyang malupa, de sala gopa sho. Okay, so that ends that practice. Thank you very much. We still have our dedication to do for our session. But before we do that, does anybody have questions or comments?
I just have a question about where can I email you for the materials?
You can put it right in the chat.
Okay, I'll just send you my email and then.
Okay, and your phone number, because do you use WhatsApp? Are you familiar with WhatsApp?
I know what it is, but I don't use it, but I could get it.
I'm going to send you an invitation and it'll do it all for you automatically
Okay, thank you.
because that's how we communicate best.
Okay.
Lance, I had a random question that's somewhat related to everything tonight. The Transformation of Suffering, the book you mailed me, I don't know if you mailed that to everyone else in the packet. That's it's such a great book because I'm reading that right now. And as I'm listening to you describe all these technical terms in 101, reading that book in conjunction with hearing you now, like there's just a whole nother layer of understanding I have now.
Well, great. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I was just going to recommend, I don't know if anybody else, but some of the terms, like the description of the technical terms and behind the scenes, like that, I think is such a nice augment to doing this 8-week cycle for people to read that on their own time and then come. I've really, like, honestly, like I've read like 100 pages yesterday and it was so useful for tonight.
All right. Very
Thank
good.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you. What I'll do is I'll send a message to everybody in our WhatsApp, and I will include a link for the Transformation of Suffering and the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, so you'll know where to get those books. But having a library of these things is part of educating ourselves in our spirituality. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Lance.
Yes. Matthew, you had another question or two. We have time to talk about that if you have something.
No, I didn't have another. I don't think I had another question, but just wondering about at some point talking about what you had mentioned that was really interesting to me with the contemplation piece.
Okay.
I had a comment, I guess. When we were talking about like the Buddha being humbled and stuff, I'm from Bulgaria, and it seems like somebody else said it, but they said in Europe you work to live. In America, you live to work.
Yes, maybe so. Yeah, it's
I'm
true.
from
Americans are
Bulgaria,
crazy.
How cool! Way cool. Definitely link up with you on the WhatsApp if you get on there. Really cool. Awesome.
I'm sorry. What was that you said? What was cool?
Maya's Bulgarian too, right? Small world, yeah, because there's not
Oh,
many
I
of
see.
us.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yes. Yeah, it's really great how, there's many students from South America and Europe, Spain, and China, and Southeastern Asia, and so on. There's many people who are paying attention to the Dharma all around the world. So I'll just take a minute and say that, what I am offering everybody is my experience with the Dharma. I've asked permission to be able to teach. I've been teaching Buddhism 101 now for, I've lost count, 16 years, 17 years, something like that, since 2005. And I've taught it many times in many different Dharma centers and so on. And I teach what I know. And so I'm teaching at a fundamental level, at basically a outer level, what the outer meaning of things is, with a little bit sprinkling of inner level and occasionally a wisdom level. But this is how we begin. There are great teachers, Lama teachers who come from Tibet, who all have Zoom presence, who are teaching on Zoom, doing practices on Zoom, and I will send you a list of their websites and so on. And if you're interested in following them, you can sign up and get their messages weekly of what their teachings are and so on like that. And I invite everybody to partake, at least to see what it's like with the lamas. What we're teaching here is in English. We're trying to keep it understandable to our Western minds. And we're trying to develop a vocabulary. So this is what Zara was speaking to, that there is this vocabulary that we is so useful in understanding, the philosophy of Buddhism. So it's not a religion. Buddhism is not a religion. A religion implies that there is a supreme being. The Buddha is not a supreme being. It's not a God. Doesn't profess to be a God. Is not a creator in the sense of a supreme being is thought of. It's a philosophy of oneself to become awakened, to realize what it is that is holding us back from being able to be the awakened one, to be a Buddha. So this is what the doctrine, this is what the philosophy of Buddhism is about, is that we are responsible for our own happiness. We're responsible for our own suffering. So to recognize what makes all that up and how we control that is what we're trying to learn and practice. So that's a little bit of a story of what I'm trying to accomplish with everybody. We have people who have been doing this Buddhism 101 with us for many years, and that it goes around in a circle. We repeat things many times, but we always try and keep it in fresh terms and a fresh way of looking at it. But this is how we kind of purify our understanding, by looking at it in different ways, practicing it in different ways. So this is common throughout all Buddhism. This is part of the Buddhist technique, the Buddhist philosophy of teaching and learning, is repeating these things over and over again. So, but there's a growth to this, and there's a spiral that we finally get to Buddhahood. So that's what we're all trying to do. So thank you all very much for joining us. Now it's time to do our last dedication. So there is this prayer that we recite. I'll put it up on the screen. It is the dedication prayer by Lord Jigden Sumgun. And if you've got your prayer book, it's on page 20, I think, 21 and 22. So recite along with me, please, all together. Keep your microphones muted so we don't feedback. Okay. Okay. This is the dedication prayer by Lord Jigden Sumgun, who is the founder of our lineage 800 years ago. Jigden Sumgun. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings, in samsara and nirvana, and the innate road of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master equal to the infinity. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om. Ah. Hum. Om. Ah. Hum. Om. Ah. Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much. So if anybody needs to send me your email address or phone number so we can put you on our WhatsApp. If anybody needs any of the books or texts or anything, let me know so I can arrange to get those to you.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you, Gary, very much.
Lance,
you.
thank you.
You're welcome, Zara. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lance. It was beautiful. We appreciate you.
Good. Thank you. We'll continue
Thanks.
again next week, same time.
Everyone.
Yeah. See you then.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lance. The book that Zara was talking about,
Yes.
do you want me yeah, can I grab that, please? That sounds great.
Yeah, I'll send it in a message on WhatsApp.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a
You'll
good
have
night.
to order
everybody.
it. Yes, you'll have to order it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay.
I just
So-
wanted to make sure that I sent it in the Zoom chat, my email
Yes.
and phone
Yeah,
number.
I see it. Here it is.
Okay.
And I got it. And did you enjoy this?
Yes, it was very, very beneficial.
Is
Thank
what you
you.
thought it was going to be?
I mean, I kind of went into it with no expectations, and so I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
See you next time. Okay.
Lance, can I just talk to you about something just very quick?
Sure.
I just want to, because I don't know if I said it to you before, but for some reason it's been like lingering with me a little bit. But like, because a few times ago,